Welcome back, everyone, to the Tapping School Summit. Today, we have a topic that I know is going to be a very popular one. And I have a dear friend and fellow Tapping School alumni, Jessica, here to share her story and her tips about breast implant illness and women's health. She works with women on all sorts of topics, but her story and this topic I know is going to be a popular one. So thank you, Jessica. Welcome to the Tapping School Summit. I'd love for you to just share with everyone a little bit about your story and what brought you to tapping.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so thankful to be a part of this and just to be able to share the journey of health and wellness in a different way that the world isn't really necessarily talking about as much yet. I keep saying like EFT is a not yet kind of thing, but yet it's becoming such a go-to for a lot of people when you bring it up. And so this summit's just amazing to be able to share with people all the different ways that people are utilizing it and how it's making an impact on their health emotionally and physically. Like that's a huge piece for me.
That
So
that's the
yeah,
thing, right? Like lots of people take care of their physical health, but a big part of your health is your emotions. And we know like tapping is the quickest way to help you move through big emotions, stuck energy, or even, when you're going through things like chronic illness or weird things happening to your body that you don't know what it is. So I'm so excited and grateful that you're willing to share your story. Can you share for everyone a little bit about like what you did before this and your background and yeah, your journey with tapping and your explant?
yeah, absolutely. So for about 20 years, I was a hairstylist, and that kind of plays into my explanting story also. And within those 20 years, I had a lot of different things that were coming up for me health wise that I didn't really realize were there for the reason that they were. And I always attributed my, a lot of my concerns around my body and my health to standing on my feet for 20 hours a day, or not 20 hours a day, but for 20 years. And it was one of those things where layer after layer I kept going, what is wrong with me and why am I feeling this way? And so to fast forward a little bit from when I did hair, it was one of those things when I stepped away, I became a part of this whole world out there of a different way of thinking with health and wellness. And I had always been super passionate about it, but I didn't know the depth of what was out there. And I had this one woman who I had met randomly, and well, not randomly, we know how that works.
Yep.
And she did EFT. And she asked my friend and I if we would be open to going and doing a session out in the woods. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what this is, but yes, let's go do it. And I was going through a really hard time in my life. Actually, it was a very stressful time. And I needed something, but I didn't know what. So we went out in the woods and we started tapping, and we were having this whole experience, people walking around us, looking at us, like, what are you guys doing? And I walked away from that whole, like, just hour and a half experience, and I felt so different. I felt so much lighter and clear on what I needed to do to move forward. So that being said, we did a few other sessions, just her and I one on one, and I had some really powerful experiences of just understanding what was happening with inside of me emotionally that I didn't realize was there. And she was able to walk me through some of the deeper work that we do now that I understand it since I've been certified in it. And so we did that piece of it. And then I set it aside for a period of time. And I would be introduced to EFT on and off from people and things like that. But I came into a season of my life after I was done doing hair, and my body just was not healing like I thought it should. And I'm like, I'm not standing there anymore. I'm not doing all the things that I was doing to my body. And why are things changing and healing? And at the time, I was probably about 6 years into having my implants. And I never had really thought anything of them. But to backtrack into when I made the decision to do that, it was one of those things that I always felt emotionally like it was going to fulfill something for me, and it didn't. And so I think that really played a whole different level of what that was for me physically. And the rejection that my body and my mind was having with it. So that's that, we can talk about that after. But through that process, when I moved into discovering what breast implant illness was and I was introduced to it, I was like floored. I had no idea this was even out there. And it all stemmed from a conversation one of my girlfriends and I had, who also had implants at the time and has now explanted. And she said, have you ever checked out this Facebook group? And I'm like, no. And I started really diving in, and I literally was a part of that group and discovering and just researching over and over again for 2 years. And so those 2 years were quite the journey of just observing. And the interesting part for me was I wasn't super sick. I was feeling symptoms of things, but I wasn't super sick like a lot of the women I was reading about. And so I felt like, well, that's not me. It's like, that's not me. But I'm a huge advocate. One of the things that I work with my clients on is being proactive in our health and not always having to be reactive. Right. So I was like, I'm doing this to be proactive in my health. I want to dig into this, figure out what this looks like so I can be proactive versus reactive and not be able to do the explant if I ever chose to. So that was kind of the journey I had gone on. And in the meantime, that was actually 4 years ago when I actually explanted. And it took 2 years of digging in and discovering what it was and why these women were so sick and what that looked like for me. And a lot of my symptoms were pretty basic, I thought, until after.
Wow. Do you mind sharing what some of your symptoms were, just for anybody listening? Because you said like some women were like really extreme, like you're like they're sick, but were
Yeah.
yours more subtle?
Yeah, mine were a lot, they were a lot more subtle, but they were affecting me every day. I felt like I couldn't really fully be myself. I mean, I'm going to be 50 this year. So at the time I was only, 44, somewhere in there. And I felt like, why aren't I thriving? And why aren't I really living into this body that I've been gifted and feeling my best because I did all the other things. And so for me, the three top, I would say, if you want to call them symptoms or whatever it was for me, was I had a lot of achy joints. Like it hurt to do this. And again, I attributed that to doing hair for 20 years. And I also had some pretty significant brain fog, and which I was contributing to like memory loss almost. I would be in a conversation with people and I would have to sit and really focus on you and pay attention to what you were saying in order to be able to respond. And it wasn't all the time, but it was enough to where it was significant in times where I was like, what did that person just say to me and how am I going to respond? And there was even one time where I looked at my husband and I said, I don't know what's going on with me, but I am nervous that I have the onset of dementia. And I
Wow.
said, so I need you to pay attention to me. And if you're noticing things, we might need to figure something out.
Whoa, that
Yeah.
is intense. That must have been
Yeah.
scary to hear too. Like you're
Yeah.
young.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, like I said, I was in my early 40s. And so those were two. And the last one was really, I had a hard time getting full breath. Like I
Mhm.
never could really take that full breath. And I, again, contributed that to all the chemicals I was around for 20 years and all of the things that I was doing in that world. And not to make it a negative towards the hair industry, but there's a lot going on there, right? And so I just kept thinking that's what it was. And so once I went through my explant, that's a story in itself.
So did you feel better after? Like once they came out, what was the journey like on recovery?
Yeah, it was pretty significant. The moment I actually got out of my surgery, and again, I'll never forget this moment. I got out of surgery, and I started coming to, and I didn't know what to really think, but the doctor that did my surgery, when I was telling her about my breath and not being able to breathe, said, well, that's pretty obvious because there's a lot of weight on your chest right now also. And I didn't think of that piece of it. And so she said, I think you're going to feel a lot better after. And I came to, and I kind of, once you're out of surgery and all the things, and all of a sudden I like literally took my first breath, and it was a full breath, and I just started crying. I could cry again just saying it. It was like, oh my gosh, I can breathe. I can breathe.
I have head to toe goosebumps. What, like, it's literally, and it's so symbolic. Like, it was like the beginning of this new chapter for you. And it really makes you realize like how little things like a full breath is such a blessing, you know?
8 years, I didn't take a full breath unless I really focused on it and knew what I was doing. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest. And before I did my explant, I spent a whole week on doing many months preparing for my surgery, but I really spent a week just with me and doing all of the healing things to prepare me emotionally and physically for this experience, because I knew that there was probably going to be a process to go through emotionally afterwards. And I wanted to be prepared for that too. And that was the part that I've now discovered with women that I really want to be able to support them in because of that process. But I wrote everything down that I was feeling at that time, everything. I mean, that was one of the big things. I journaled and wrote, and I mean, any nook and cranny in my body or, whatever it was, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Because so often when we feel better later, we forget.
I think
Yeah.
like
So now I go back and I'm like, check, check, check. It's pretty amazing.
so
So
fast. I think you have a book in you. I think that this is
yeah,
good. Something much bigger, because I know there's women out there that, and our bodies, I find, can often be a mystery as a woman. Like, we're like, I have this weird symptom, and the doctor's like, you're fine. And you're like, okay, but as a woman when something is off, and it is your job to advocate for your body. And I just acknowledge you for, you took the time, you did the research, you figured it out. And so where does tapping fit into all this? Because here we are now, you went through this healing journey. I know you do many things outside of tapping as well. You have your coaching business, you do all sorts of, you always have like this magical toolbox of things that can heal you. So I love you as a resource for that. And when it comes to women going through this and they're like, well, how could tapping help me through it? Can you share some tips for them on that?
yeah, absolutely. I actually might even look down a little bit because I wrote a few notes about this because I feel for women who are in a place where they don't know necessarily that this could be it.
Mhm.
And, I understand the desire to want to be in our feminine state and to want to look beautiful and to feel significant in that way, right? I mean, there's something very special about that. And so when a woman starts to go through the process of, am I really going to remove that piece of me that has made me feel more feminine, more sexual, more all of that, it's a real emotional thing that women go through. And I remember my doctor, when I went in for the consultation, he had said to me and my husband, because my husband was with at the time, and he looked at my husband and he said, I hope you know, she's not doing this for you. She's getting these implants for her. And so when you bring that full circle, and he was right, like my husband had nothing to do with it. He was just there as a support, but I had nursed 2 babies and done all the things. And I wanted to be feminine and feel pretty again. Right. So when you think of this process of leading into this explant and the emotions that may be going through that, there's so many things that are stirring up. Why did I get them in the first place? Why did I choose to do this to my body or to my appearance, good or bad? Like, there's no shame in any of it, right? Like, women decide to do what they do for their own significance or significant reason, like the doctor kind of stated. So I guess for women who are going through it, when you think of that emotional lead up to that and what's it going to be like after, but also the experience of it. And so being able to tap through those emotions of what brought me to this place of wanting these implants to start with, and how can I heal that side of me, was huge. And I really hope women look into that more than just the appearance piece of it, because there was something that led them to desiring to have the implants in the first place.
This is
So
such an important piece. And I know you have other points you want to share, but I just want to expand on this a little because I mean, I've totally thought of it myself. Like I've totally considered it. And it's funny because you come to mind whenever I consider it, I think of your story. And there's a few other women I know that have had breast implant illness. And it is like, yeah, well, but why? And like you said, a big piece of it is because it's nice to look feminine and beautiful and sexual. And you see other people have it and you're like, oh, that looks beautiful. I want to look like that. And so really tapping around your own how you define beauty and what you think it's going to do for you and what is the feeling underneath it that you are looking for. So that alone can be like a whole entire um, topic of discussion. So I'm curious, so you tapping around, yes, why you're getting them, what's the deeper reason behind it, and then I'm also thinking like you could also tap if you have any trauma around it too. I don't know if you've have done any sessions like that, but I'd love to hear any other tips you have.
yeah, that's huge, because I remember one of the little silly things, but was impactful for me was, and this is going to sound kind of funny as I say it, but when I was growing up, my nickname was Tiny Bubbles. And so that came up during some of my sessions. So at the time, like in the last few years when I've been being certified and had the privilege of having a lot of work done for myself in that process, I had a lot of sessions around it. And that kept being brought up. And I was like, why was that so important to me? And when I was nursing my babies, I felt very different. And then after, I went back to the tiny bubbles, right? So
Mhm.
it sounds silly, but those were things that I was able to really tap through that affected me when I was young. And that came up again. So even after the fact of years later, I mean, it's been through, well, at that point, it had been 2, 3 years later that I had been going through my sessions with people, and it still was coming up from when I was a little girl and young.
This is so key. I'm so glad you brought this up because now that you say it, I think of like comments I heard my mom say about, her breasts or other women, just and it can just be like the tiniest little thing you heard when you were young that, like you said, it's in your subconscious that creates a belief, that creates a story that can impact you for many, many years later. So that's fascinating that you can tap with people on that, right? Like you can build a new belief about your body and about your worthiness and about your beauty through an experience like this.
Well, and the beautiful part about tapping is so often we don't even know that that was something that we were thinking of or was in our subconscious until all of a sudden we go back to visit that little girl, or we go back and all of a sudden it just like comes to you. I have clients who say that to me all the time. They're like, I didn't even know that was in me. And I'm like, I know, isn't that the beauty of it? So now we get to heal that part of you.
Yes, it's so true. And that happens in so many tapping sessions, what on multiple topics. You're like, what? I didn't even know that was there. And like you said, it's gentle, right? Like it's not like this big traumatic realization. You're like, oh, it's a slight little thread.
Yeah.
that-
Yeah. And I think that's what I appreciate so much about EFT. And I will be honest, I think this is an important part for me to share with people too, is as a mindset and wellness coach, as I have been for the years that I have, as I was doing the work with women really on these emotional pieces of their life and the physical aspects of their body, or just illnesses in general or things like that, I always felt like there was something missing. Like I always would get them so far, and I was able to be like, okay, they get it, like they see it, they're acknowledging it, and now what is where I would land. And I felt like I couldn't really have the effect that I wanted with them and the healing that they deserved. And so that's when I decided to find someone who could help me be certified in EFT. And this is how beautiful life is and how it's always working for us, right? Like I was like, where is this person? How am I going to find that one that aligned with me and my beliefs and how I wanted to serve the women I work with, right? And literally I started asking around, and I had 2 women within 2 days mention your name. And I was like, she's my person. And so I reached out to you. I don't know if you remember that, but I reached out to you and you were starting a certification program shortly after that. And so I started going through that. And when I did that, my coaching and the work that I got to do with my clients was game changing. It just it didn't stop at the awareness piece of it. They actually were able to release so they could start to transform their life. And that's what I wanted. I knew something was missing.
Oh my
So
God. So we're so lucky to have you in this community because you are one of the most talented practitioners and advanced. You're also an advanced practitioner. And for those of you listening, the practitioners that have the advanced training can take you a lot deeper, a lot quicker. They know the techniques, they know how to listen for certain things. And it's just been such an honor to have you in this community, and especially for women that are going through something like an explant. Like, it's a very specific journey, and other things like like I said, you're a resource for all things health. Like, when I was going through some health stuff, you were like, had all the things lined up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful to have you in our world. So I want to make sure that we touched on all your points, because I know you had some certain things written down. Did we capture them all today? Is there any other things you wanted to touch on?
yeah, I think for the most part, I really want women who are considering this to pay attention to why and what is it that they're feeling it's going to serve them emotionally or physically, and do your research. And from there, if you need support on tapping through that, that's another resource to be able to do that, to be ahead of it, like the proactive versus having to be reactive kind of experience is what I always go to. And for the women who have them and love them, that's great too, right? Like that's, but if you're feeling anything and your body's having discomfort of any sort, pay attention to it. Be open to exploring why and seeing if this could be a possibility. And then there are the women who are really sick and who haven't gotten the answers and don't know why. And this could be a tool that could help them really unfold the emotion piece of it. Because when our emotions are on fight or flight, our body is reacting. And it's like this vibrational experience that your body can't settle from to even think clearly to make some new decisions. And
That's
so I will be honest with you, the moment I explanted, and I remember it was in February. So this is my anniversary month, 4 years ago. And so the timing of this is beautiful. And I remember that following March, we were somewhere, and it was Easter. And I put on my Easter dress and I looked at my husband, and this might make me emotional, but and I was like, I feel so beautiful. Like I felt like me again. I felt like I had my body back. And I know not all women who explant feel that way, because that is part of what we could tap on too. Because a lot of women feel like their body was taken from them again, or, if they don't feel that sexiness. But I literally, for some women, they do. And I felt like I had me back. And that was the beauty of it. So,
I have had to show goosebumps. Wow, that's what we want for all women, right? That you can look at yourself and feel like you again.
yeah.
There's so much more I could ask and talk about on this topic. And I know that you also do a lot more than just this topic. You work with women that are, wanting to improve their health, that are going through some overwhelm, that have busy lives, and they want something to help regulate them, keep their emotions in check. So please share where everyone can connect with you. Where are you online? Where can we get all the goodies that you have in store for everyone?
Yeah, I would say probably if you're wanting just to get a feel for what it is that I do and my core of who I am and that kind of thing, I'd go to my website, and it's simply jessicastaff.live, LIVE, and you can just play around in there and book a discovery call if you're interested, and just even a conversation of, where you're at and what it is that you're going through. And if you're considering explanting at all, or just having some of these, like you said, even just as a woman who is living life and overwhelmed and feeling like, what is wrong with me? Like, I get that a lot. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I pull this together? And it's some pretty beautiful work that we get to do utilizing the tapping. So yeah.
A gift. Thank you so much for sharing today, Jessica, for being a part of our community. And to end off, I will just say, you know, my own story of tapping started with my body and not knowing what was going on, and tapping helped me find that answer. And so we always say in tapping school, tapping finds you and you're ready for it. If you have crossed, this has crossed your path today, if you are listening to this, there's probably something here for you. So go follow Jessica, even just send her a message, just start that conversation. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.